you would like to build a solution in SharePoint dealing with sensitive data, this can be very challenging. In this video, I would like to give you different options and how skybow can help you with that.
There are basically two concepts that we use in SharePoint. The first concept is if you work really with item level permissions. So you have lists and the content and you work with the out-of-the-box SharePoint permissions. I want to give you some pros and some pros and cons about it. Main pro for that approach is that it really protects the access to sensitive data. So if you work with sensitive data, then that this is definitely the way to go, and really use permissions on those items. Next one, it's also good if you work with permissions that it's not visible in views. Because in views you can of course use filters, but if you remove the filter, etc., you would see those items again, and also in search results. So they are not there because you have no access at all to that item or list or whatever level you're going to define that permission. But there are some downsides. First of all, and that's the main limitation from my point of view, is the limitation about the 50,000 permission breaks per list library. After that, if you have reached that limit, it's not possible to set any additional permission breaks at all. So it will stop doing it. And therefore, because that's a limit, if you work with a large amount of items, it's needed to make some kind of housekeeping. I mean, it's not that you cannot do it if you have more than 50,000 items in your list, but you need to think about housekeeping, whether export like finished items into another library, or put them all into a certain folder, or set the permissions to read only in a folder, because otherwise you have again every single item broken. So that's another downside. And if you use that approach to set the permissions, I will show you how you can do that using skybow. It's some kind of delay in time, because we will use triggered actions. You can also use scheduled actions, but all these background actions, they are not executed as you click save, for example. So it could take a couple of seconds until that is set. And yeah, that's one of the other downsides. So and in general, it's always on the whole item, so that's the lowest level. So no column permissions, so you cannot. Whether you see the whole item or not. The second concept would be if you just limit the forms and action visibility, so just on the visible side of the elements or items. Pros of that approach is that you can be very granular down to every single control and field, and you can, of course, limit the views to filter out items based on certain metadata user fields, etc. Then that's the upside of that one. It reflects immediately. So as soon it's there, and the metadata or whatever the group you specified is there, it's there, it's visible, or it's not visible anymore. But as well, here we have some downsides, because it's not real permission. You will still have access via custom views or code, if you know how to write, if you're a developer and you know how to write CSM or JavaScript, or you simply use the RSS feed. As well, in search, these items would still show up if someone would intentionally try to access. So for really sensitive data, that's not good to just do that one. Also, it's quite complex and time-consuming to configure all these places, what you want to show and hide, and all the scenarios. But yeah, that's a downside. And for the case where you really want to limit people to create additional views, because with additional views and with normal permissions like contribute or edit, etc., people would have access to create their own views, private views. And by this, they can, of course, just create a new view, removing all the filters, and then they would see all the items again. To limit that one, you would have to create custom permission levels and disable the functionality of creating custom views. So the solution would be to have a combined approach. Combined approach will mean you would set the item permissions, for example. I will show you that in a use case afterwards. To set the permissions using triggered actions based on certain conditions. Then maybe you use these permissions in expressions. There is an expression who can check if the logged in user has access to an item, read access, edit access, etc. Most of you probably don't even know that this possibility exists, but there is a placeholder in the expression builder where you can check for this real SharePoint permissions and use that in a visible expression, for example. Then that's one of the basic concept how we normally do solutions. We create SharePoint groups, and the SharePoint groups are used as like roles. So we have an admin group, we have maybe we have a certain manager group, etc. And then we use those groups in visible expressions again, because there is this functionality is member of group, this expression, and then you can use these groups to control the visibility of everything, of buttons, of controls, of everything on the form and for the list actions and page actions, etc. And what you can do, because those groups they will be packaged and published as well. And so if you go to a new site, these groups will be created as well. And then whether you just simply add your own, so like dedicated people to those groups, or if you say you want to manage the people in Active Directory groups, then simply add Active Directory groups, because this function here also has a flag where you can check members inside Active Directory groups. So it's not only direct members, you can also check if you are in a certain group. Yeah, that's one thing which most people forget. We do have that details panel showing if you right click and say details, for example, if you press in the old view, you press the info icon in the upper right corner, you have that detail panel, and there you're also able to change the items. You see all the items, you can change them, and we have a functionality to disable that panel, because you would also overcome all the logic on the form. If you have some specific logic, some visible stuff, etc., in the details panel we are not able to show our form. You would just see all the columns, all the fields. No, if you have access, you can change it, and that's not what you want. So you can disable just the whole panel. I will show you as well in the demo. And like I said, the custom permission level to disable the creation of views. So you can really lock down everything, even for people who need, in some cases, you need to have access to a list to create an item or update an item. And then, yeah, And even if you have some permission set, it might be that you don't want people to see author items automatically, etc. So you can limit them that they are not able to create additional views, just the ones that you provide, and that's it. And last but not least, like I already mentioned, if you create additional custom permission levels or groups and permissions in general, we will provision them. So it will be part of the package, and you can provision it along if you make a package and deploy it. All right, so that's the slide part, the basics. Now let's jump into the demo. I thought we used expense demo again, I've used already quite a lot. I have, as some of you probably know, this expense process. It's an expense approval, and it consists of 4 phases. So we have the preparation, then it's the first approval, a second approval based on a group. So this is a people picker that is here, the manager. Second one is just a group of people, a management group, and then it's finished. So back to my site. So where are my? Sorry, I need to see my notes that I don't forget anything. It's just small here. All right. So first of all, what I did here on that solution is I wanted to have permissions applied, and this I did in the background using our actions. So if we look into the Solution Studio, then we have a couple of lists here. We have the main list, we have a sub list of activities and the sub list of receipts. So those are the ones that we see here. And I want the permissions to be applied to them. So we would use in the background a triggered action, and we do that just with that one. So that's another one. The trigger is for all cases. So if you add an item or update an item, because if you change the status, for example, I also want to change the permissions. Now, before I show you the configuration, I can show you how I normally start. Basically, I'm creating an Excel matrix. That's just makes it easier to see visually before I do it in the background who should have access in what phase, for example. So what I've done here is I have my 3 lists. I have my 4 phases. So preparation, verifying line manager, management, and finished. And then for each phase, I have the different roles. And this one marked with the 2 people is a group, and these are 2 people picker fields. In the first phase, only the employee should have contribute, because that employee will create the request and sends it to the approval. Afterwards, so during that time, the line managers and the management, they will not have access to these at all. That's what we see here. Afterwards, the employee will get read only, and the line manager gets contribute, and so forth. So that's what I'm visualizing here. Management would already have access. In the next phase, they also get read, and only the management is left. The receipts, that can happen, that you want to do something like that. For example, the receipts are not editable at all after it's always just in preparation, so they are not allowed to change the receipts itself. They have to send it back. to preparation if there's something is missing or something is wrong, and that's what I defined here. But it's up to you how you define it. And then once it's finished, I set everything to read only. I have an additional group for the admins. The admins, they should always get full control. And that's how I start thinking about how it should work in the process. Now, based on that one, I go back to my site here. And if we look into the configuration, it's first of all, I'm checking if the phase has changed, because that's my main trigger for the permission change. If that has changed, then I'm setting a variable first, but that's only because I also, in that step, I'm setting the permissions of the expenses and also for the receipts. Receipts, as you probably know from other videos from me, all the receipts are stored in a folder, so I just have to set the permissions on the folder of the receipt, not on every single receipt. So that's why I'm getting the correct folder here first, and then I have two scopes. First is the expense item itself, that's the one here, and the second one is the receipt folder. Both are more or less set up the same way. In the expense, what I'm doing, we have actually created three additional three actions. Those are the ones we see here. So what they will do is we can reset the permissions, we can break them, and we can add some permissions. So why I'm doing it like this? Because then I don't have to care about all the permission changes, etc. So every time, doesn't matter if it's a change, if it's added new or whatever, I'm resetting it. Even if it's new, reset will not do anything if it's new, but it will inherit from the parent just to reset it. After that, I'm breaking the item again, and that's as simple as this. I say which list, which item. I will not copy the existing permissions, so I will clear it completely, and then I will say clear the subscopes. Those are these limited access things, and on the sub childs, etc. Then after that one, it's completely empty, and I will start from scratch on how the permissions should be set. So first of all, I'm setting the admins, and as you can see, it's very simple to configure. I choose the list, the item, I choose the permission level, in this case full control, and in the group user group field, I can enter whether email of a user or a group name. I can use also multiple groups or multiple emails, comma separated. So here I'm just using the name, and then this group gets full control. After that, I have additional scopes. So every phase is, I split it into using our scope control here. So preparation, and we saw only the employee will have contribute. So I only have one action. The employee gets contribute. The employee is a people picker field, so I can simply pass the email address like this, and that's it. So that phase is covered. In the next phase, we see the employee gets read, the manager gets contribute, and the management gets contribute. So management is a group, that's why it's like this. Line manager is called manager. So quite simple here. And so forth. So it's for every phase, I specify who should have access in that phase. And after that, I do exactly the same for the folder. So the folder is reset, I break it, I add full control. And as you saw in the Excel, I could theoretically do different permissions here. So yeah, I see. The only difference here is that the ID I'm using from the variable that I specified here on the top. So that's why I needed that variable, because I need it in all these actions. I need that variable, and that's how all the permissions are set. And we can check in the history when it's executed, etc. and that's why it takes some time after saving to apply these permissions. So that's the first thing that is there. The second one is if I want to use that permissions somewhere, for example, on the form, and the scenario I took here was I used the edit button because all the others, they are anyway controlled by the face. So if I look here into the visible expression, those are using the face and also certain users. So if I'm the manager, then I will see it if it's in the face verifying line manager. But in other cases, you would like to check the actual permission. So for example, the edit button, the one here, I should only see if I have really permission on that item. So what I did here is the visible expression on that edit button is actually this token, and that's coming from the context user, where you probably know how to get the email and the manager and the login name, etc. There is here a new, it's more or less new. We have that has permission node, and you see we have add item, delete, edit, read item, and we can simply use one of them and check, or it will automatically check if I have delete current item or if I have delete list, if I have edit item, etc. Simply double click and you can use that as a visible expression for a button. That will reflect to this here. So if I'm going to my solution and I have two browsers here. I'm logged in as Matthias, and let me take expenses in preparation. Now I will take all of them. So here we have to consider that I'm as Matthias, I'm also site collection admin, but I have a user who has less permission, so I will see the items. If they are not filtered out, I would still see them even if I have no permissions. But I have a John Smith who's there already, and if we look at that item, so for example, that one here where it's submitted, if we look at the permission, it's September, and we see Matthias can edit, John can view only, because it's in the next phase. I as an line manager, I have to approve it. So what I will see on that September is I have the approval, I can edit, etc., because I have edit permissions. If we look to this one where I'm logged in as John, I see the same September down here. And if I open up that item, we see I don't have the approval, but that's coming through another visible expression based on the phase and that I'm not the manager. But also the edit button is gone because I don't have real access. And this is also the case if we look into the SharePoint list itself. I don't have edit now, because if you just use visible expression, you would be able, you see John is only seeing two of them. The one from me, he will not see. But if you right click, the edit button is completely gone. That's coming through the permission, right? So you can use this real permissions to check everything on the form, and not just if you have edit right, also if you have delete right, you can show or hide a delete button. If you have view rights, you can show something, or based on real SharePoint permissions, you can check visibility. The other thing is that you can use this is member of group based on groups. So what I did, I created 2 groups. I have an admin group and I have a management group, and I've added an additional button here on the start, and I see that because as Matthias, I'm admin. As John, I'm not admin. So I don't see that. And this is simply done by a visible expression. You see, here it's not here. If we look at that, that's actually a skybow automation action web part you can add on each page. This one here. And this button here is simply having a visible expression. And the visible expression is based on this is member of group, which is available as well on the user. Here we have these 2 is member of group functions, and the one is for Active Directory groups and that one is for SharePoint groups. Simply specify the name, and this flag here I can show you when I add it. No, here it's not, but it's documented. This flag would say look into groups or not. So go recursive into the groups or not. So here I said no, because I would add my person directly into the group and not using Active Directory groups in this group. So that's the flag. And this simple check will show or hide the button for this admin group only. So that's another thing, how you can show or hide things already on the page. So you can also add starting points, for example, other buttons only available for a certain group of people. Right. Then I was talking about these panels. So when you have some logic on the form that you, I don't know, disable certain fields, or yeah, here it's all here, but sometimes you have additional fields, not just year, month, and remark. You have additional fields. Then you could just right-click, click on details, and in here you would see all the columns, all of them, and you are able to edit them. So what we can do is we can disable that. That's the thing here. We can disable basically all these 3 things. Has access. If you don't want users to see who else has access, you can disable that part. You can access the properties, but just like that, you just see an empty part. And if you click edit, then it shows you the real edit form. It looks like it's also opening in here. Was not the case before, but and that edit form is from us again. So it would have all the permissions that is set on the edit form, but this one is disabled in the list in the form settings. It doesn't matter on which form. You click on form settings where you specify the size, and down here you see the details pane settings, and the 3 options here. You can disable everything, and if I would enable it again, just to show you real quick. Come on, saved, reload. Then we have that issue that you can simply change everything in the right panel, and we can disable that one if it loads or not. Here we go. So that's what you know from out of the box. So if you would have access, you can simply click and change the field to another value. That's not what you want, so you simply disable it. 2 last things. One is the customer permission level. So what I created, you see here, I'm able to create new views. I'm able to change those views. I can even remove filters, like here, me, it's filtered by me, okay, remove it. and I see all of them because I have the permissions. And if you have contribute permissions, you can do that. So I simply went to site permissions, advanced, and then under permission levels here, there is one additional one. So I used contribute, that's the one I would like to use. And I simply made a copy of that one. So you click on the permission level, say copy, and then I simply removed that one, manage personal views, create, change, and delete personal views of lists. If you do that, and John is having that on that list permission, you will see new view is disabled. He cannot change views. He cannot remove the filters that were added, etc. So this way you can keep it as you define, and it's not possible to create additional views and show other fields and items you probably don't want to show. And the very last thing is to package and publish all of that. You can go to groups and roles, and then under here you would see additional groups. You see these two. If you select them, they will be packaged and published, as well the additional permission levels. So to really that everything comes along, if you deploy to production, you don't need to create these permission levels and apply it, etc. So permission levels are created, groups are created, they can be used in expressions, and also the permissions, if you have specific permissions, for example, using that groups, that's what I did here on the site. Next to the 3 default ones, I added the expense administrators to have full control and everyone to have read. And this will be packaged as well and deployed. And that's possible on every list, basically. So on every list in the background packaging options, you can say yes, package permissions, which is the default setting. Here it's deactivated. By default, it's activated.
These were the different options, and I showed you how powerful they are if you combine them. If you have further questions, please put them in the comments below or reach out to us. Thanks for watching this video and see you the next time.